Welcome, folks, to MJ's Hobby Corner, and working hard here on my deep sea project. And this is phase two, the coral reef, the terrain, right? We're going to be playing deep oars, and I want to have some really cool terrain. So let me show you guys what I've done. This was yesterday's video. If you haven't seen part one, I'll make sure I have all the links in the description and everything so you can see how this started. This is the piece today, and this is finished, and this is a head of coral here, a giant coral, some tube worms, another shelf coral here, a different kind of shape, some seashells, tinfoil rocks, some algae, and then an octopus that I actually sculpted very easily out of a sculpted clay. All right, and so it's a giant octopus, and he's hanging out there right underneath that coral, maybe waiting for some prey. And then we have a giant scallop here that I kind of glued in, and some more seashells. Sponge, right? All that is that insulation material. It's that yellow, soft, spongy material. Makes excellent replicas of living sponges. So there's this head of coral. And then I'm just about finished with this one. Here's the tube worms again. And I'm going to add more tube worms growing right out of the coral, the sponge, I mean. This is a chimney sponge, and of course it's massive. I mean, look at the size of this thing. And then corals, more corals. I showed how I did these corals. Now I do need to paint these seashells for this particular piece, and I gotta add a few more things to the base, but this is pretty much done. And I have two coral heads. Now in just a minute we're going to go check out the table that I'm setting up, so that you guys can see how these pieces fit together. And I have a couple of other things that I want to show you guys, some tricks that I learned, for making these coral reefs and stuff. So on my tray here, I have some pieces that I sculpted. And I'm collecting, basically just doing a bunch of little sculptures. And I have like another octopus here. Okay, and I got to paint this. I have a little stingray, and this was done very, very easily. This, nothing to it, really. There is tinfoil under there. I cut up a piece of tinfoil and shape it in the shape of the stingray, and then I have a wire connecting from the tinfoil to make the tail. Okay, and then I add these little lobes and everything else. Now, this is going to be on a flat piece of rock or whatever on one of the coral reef pieces, just to decorate. So all these things, all these critters that I'm making, and again, this snail is larger than a dog, probably the size of a bear. These things are just to decorate the terrain piece, to give it more interest. And here I have a nice little sponge system, a cluster, and I'll be making some barnacles and things like that. And all of these things will go glued to the terrain to give it more interest. I have a chain because I will have an anchor somewhere with the chain wrapped around the reef, give the impression, I mean, humans are, they do have an impact on the reef, and so maybe a ship went down and all that's left is that anchor, around the reef. And then my tinfoil fish, because a lot of these pieces, not all of them, but a lot of them are going to have little fish gliding all about. And in some cases, I will paint these little tinfoil fish and add more color to it. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to show you guys, and this is very important, this is basically a little tinfoil oven that I've made. Yes, there's about 2 feet of snow. Yeah, 2 feet of snow out there, and I don't always want to have to leave the studio and go next door to the house, and keep walking back and forth. even if I made a batch of these and took one batch out, I just don't want to have to leave the studio. I just want to work consistently in the studio. So I just take 2 pieces of tinfoil, kind of, box it in, right? Put my little Sculpey clay figure in there, cover it up, and then with my heat gun set on low, now another important thing, just as you want to put a weight on there because you don't want the tin foil to stay there. Now I do that, and it takes a few seconds. This gets really hot, so you have to be very careful. Let everything cool. If you do have a heat gun and you want to try this method, be very, very careful because this does heat up, and I tell you, it could give you a nice burn. Okay, so you want to be careful. And I usually do it in spurts so it doesn't heat up too much. You only need a few seconds if the piece is small enough. And since this has tin foil in it, all of that heats up. Heat is conducted throughout the whole piece, and it really heats this up. In fact, look, you can see a little bit of the burn mark there on the smaller pieces of clay. But it heats up your pieces, and I put a bunch of little pieces in there, and that's how I made my little octopus and my little clay stingray. And I'm going to keep making critters to adorn my reef terrain because I just think it gives it a lot more interest. And so that was one little thing I wanted to show you guys, and that's very important. I do this a lot. I've done this many, many years when I'm working with clays, right? So it's just a little trick that I've learned. Other than that, there are also little clay ovens and things that you can get. I can't really spend the money on that right now, so that's a little studio tip. All right, so I will be working more on these if you guys are interested, and only if people are interested, I will show how I make these, okay? How I make these critters. And the most important thing is, I do have a biological background, and I did a lot of work with marine organisms, but obviously you don't need that. I mean, we're working with fantasy, we're working with terrain. All you got to do is go on Google, get a few pictures of reefs or critters or whatever, and you have a ton of inspiration there. So, I use some photos of critters, and from what I remember, that's how I make these little critters. So if people are interested, I will show how I make like these sponges and all this other stuff in case people are interested. Now, some of these sponge growths you can use in an alien forest if you wanted to, right? If you want to have like an alien forest, instead of adding shells and everything else, you could make something more alien, right? And have like an alien world for Gates of Antares. But this is a coral reef. And now I want to show you guys the actual coral reef. So let's go check out the table. Okay, so this is not finished yet. I'm going old school with the actual rock, the actual reef, and then there's all the terrain. And this is the very beginning of the reef. So now here is a very specialized kind of terrain that I've done for a while. When I want to replicate cliffs and have like trees and vegetation and things like that, like in a mountain setting. I used to do this in my dioramas, and I do this now in my gaming terrain. And so this represents the coral wall here, the cliff wall. And you can see I've already shaped all of these shelf coral, and I added some tube worms. There's little pieces of coral in there. There's some more coral that I haven't glued yet. I'm going to be working on that, and there will be a lot more corals coming out of the rocks. But first, I have to paint everything, and then I add my corals later. It just makes it a lot easier, right? But for now, I have these pieces there just to give me an idea of how the reef is coming out. And then, of course, here's the piece we worked on. We have Mr. Octopus there, and the ichthyosaur is eyeing him, right? Here we have our deep sea fish, and then some deep sea sponge with the fish floating around, right? And then over here, we have another rock work. And this I make out of that, I actually use paint bottle caps. These were our older pieces. I made this with that spray foam that you get, insulation foam, and it almost looks like lunar rock. But this is perfect. Once it dries, I gave it a coat of gray and then some highlights with an even lighter gray, all with spray paint. And there's like 3 different colors in there. This makes excellent deep sea rock, like sea mounts and stuff. So I'll be making more of these because this area here represents the deeper ocean. Now I may have a darker, really dark, like Admiral Blue or whatever down here because this is a little too bright. And that will give the sense that this is the depth. And then here is the reef, and as you go down you're going to go deeper and deeper. So in fact, this coral may actually go up, okay, and kind of let's just move. I have some deep waters guys, and here's the diver that I sculpted, and he's going to be in front there. And let me just grab this coral bit and put it right there. Okay, so something like that. So this way, the brighter corals are in the shallower water. And look at the size of that octopus, man. That's a big, scary octopus. And then we have this terrain. This is going to be kept open because we do want models to be able to move around. You know, that's something very important as I'm building. I have the figures so that I can be sure that things can move around. Now, the interesting thing about deep waters, from what I understand, is that it does keep track of depth. So my divers can actually go down into the deeper reef, right? And then finally to the final step. And there are rules for that, and your divers can actually get the bends, which is, I'm really waiting to see how that works. So now that you're in the depth, then whatever our mission is or whatever, you know, may happen in the depth here. Of course, Julie would be deployed somewhere depending on what faction she is or whatever. But we have one coral cliff, one very big coral cliff. And then we have this area of the table. There will be some deeper kind of rocks and not as many organisms. Okay. And then we may have like a school of the deep sea fish here, or I don't know, sharks or whatever we want. There could even be a wreck. We could have a submersible wreck right here, and maybe that's the objective, right? So a lot of different ways to go with this whole game. So this is not finished. Still have work to do, and I will be showing you guys some tricks that I have to add to this. We may have another vertical little piece here with more corals, and there are some ledges here, and I will show you guys how we secure the foam and the books underneath here, how we secure all that so that things don't shift around. Okay, that's very important. But I really like the whole using the cloth thing lately. It's just an old school thing, you know. And of course, this is textured with texture paint and all that. I may give it another paint, a little bit of paint. So this is not finished. This is just the beginning. It's going to be all painted up. We're going to have more corals and things sticking out, and critters. You know, fish will be like hovering around here, and it's going to be pretty interesting. And there's our divers. All right, folks, I'm sorry if I talked too much. I just wanted to show you guys the whole plan, the idea of the reef for deep waters. Still going to take some work. All right, have a good one.